essentialist was James Bryan Conant, a Harvard professor and president for much of the first half of the 20th century, concerned about deprivities and knowledge and skills of high school students brought with them to college. Conant argued that standardization of college requirements for high school students. He was also influential in establishing in the establishment of the SAT. We're going to flip the page and go to the bottom of page 288. As a measure of essential knowledge that a potential college student needs to process, although not purely an essentialist movement, much of the thought and energy behind the drive of the standardized testing, the No Child Left Behind Act, the race to the top, and the Common Core is a strong essentialist flavor. The case study immediately above offers a perspective of a representative essentialist teacher. In contrast to perennialism and essentialism, the next two schools in philosophy, romanticism and progressivism, look first to the learners rather than to the curriculum. Both consider the development of learners to be the main purpose of education. A well-educated person does not necessarily have a definite body of knowledge. Rather, a well-educated person is able to function well in society and life. Romanticism, also known as naturalism, is based on the writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble pronouncing her name. An 18th century Swiss French philosopher, in a condemnation of society and the educational system of the time, Rousseau wrote Emile, a novel that details Rousseau's ideas about education through the example of a fictional young boy, Emile. I'm sorry about that. Rousseau believed that children are born good and pure once exposed to the evils of society. However, they become corrupted. To keep children good, they needed to isolate them from society as long as possible. Rousseau describes a serene yet well-controlled bucolic environment for the ideal education for Emile. He is told to be educated in a private tutor at the county manor where he lives. Emile's education begins with his explanation of the world of nature surrounding him. From his observations, he may ask questions about the natural world that the tutor answers. There are no formal lessons, no books to read or facts to memorize, no specific curriculum to learn. Emile decides that he wants to learn, and as Emile matures, the tutor helps him develop rational thinking skills, but Emile continues to decide the topics of study. While Emile is around 15, he is slowly introduced to certain social situations until he is deemed ready by his tutor to resist the evils of society and live a productive life in the social world. By the time he is 20, Emile is ready to take and make a life for himself. Unlike the perennialists and essentialists who highlight the importance of educating the individual for society, the Romantics consider the needs of the individual more important than the needs of society. For the Romantics, the person of education is individual self-fulfillment. That is, the education must help the student develop physically, intellectually, socially, morally. Although clearly an unrealistic model for tax-supported education, the ideas embedded in Rousseau's Emile have had a strong impact on the thinking of many educators. Romantics believe that education is a natural process which grows out of a children's innate curiosity. This curiosity is most obvious during the why phase of young childhood, and when nearly every utterance out of a child's mouth is another question. Why is the dog barking? Why is the boy sad? Why is the bird blue? So on and so forth. Romantics argue that we must let children's interest and curiosity drive their learning. The teacher's job is to respond to the teacher's questions as they arise, and not to impose the learning subjects that are not in interest to the child. The learner's responsibility is to maintain their natural curiosity and desire to learn, because they perceive learning to be guided by students' interest. Romantics do not advocate the establishment of a common curriculum of study. Some students may be interested in kayaking, whereas others to study photography, and still others may be fascinated how an iPod can do all it can do. As students pursue their own areas of study, the approach of teaching and learning likewise becomes individualized. Much of the learning is self-directed and self-guided by students, with teachers serving as sources of information or resources to help students satisfy their curiosity rather than functioning to task makers or authorities on knowledge. Romanticism has been especially influential in the early childhood and elementary grades. Many early childhood educators, including such pioneers as Maria Montessori, Frederick Froebel, and Joanne Pestalozzi, basically agreed with. We're going to flip the page to 290. Agreed with Rouse's ideas about humans' innate curiosity, using a child's interest to define the curriculum, although none proposed a radicalist school setting by Rousseau's pastoral manner. They did adopt some of Rousseau's other ideas about education, such as providing young children with extensive opportunities to manipulate real things such as wooden blocks, clay, and other materials. The purpose to establish learning environments to provoke students' curiosity. Today's school is such a Summerhill School in Suffolk, England, and the Sudbury Valley School in Framingham, Massachusetts, embody many of the beliefs that the Romantics in these schools were no set curricula, no formal class, and no test. Students decide what they want to study, and in some classes are expected to take responsibility for their own learning. We're now going to go to the top of page 291. Progressivism is a relatively young philosophy of education. It came to prominence in the 1920s, growing out of the progressive political and social movement of the time. The school of thought drew from the same ideas as Rousseau and from the work of John Dewey, the most influential educational philosopher of the 20th century. Progressivism views nature as being in flux, as ever-changing. Consequently, knowledge must continually be redefined and rediscovered to keep up with the change, whereas other philosophies see the mind as a jug to be filled with truth, or as a muscle that needs to be exercised and conditioned. Progressivists view the mind as a marvelous mechanism for problem solving, like the Romantics and advocates of progressive viewpoint believe that people are naturally exploring inquiries in ethics. When faced with an obstacle, they will try to find a way to overcome it. When faced with a question, they will try to find an answer. For progressivism, education to develop problem solving. Progressive educators believe that place to begin with education and study rather than with a subject matter. When following the philosophy, teachers identify what students' interests and concerns are and try to shape the problems around them. Teachers can help find students develop strategies to solve problems, pose students' motivation to solve problems, and the key of this educational model. And posing problems based on students' interests helps heighten their motivation. Students should start with simple study projects and generally learn more systematic ways to investigate until they finally master a variety of problem-solving strategies, rather than being presenters of knowledge or task makers. Teachers are intellectual guides, facilitators in the problem-solving process. Students are encouraged to be imaginative and resourceful in solving problems. They are directed to a variety of learning methods, from reading books and studying the traditional disciplines to performing experiments and analyzing data. Method is of great importance to advocates of the progressive philosophy. Conversely, knowledge, formal, traditional knowledge, is not given the same honored place. For progressives, there is really no special sacrament knowledge or subject matter that all students must learn. Instead, the value of knowledge is seen as reading only and the ability to solve human problems. Regarding the school curriculum, progressives believe that students can learn the problem-solving skills from electronics just as easily, from Latin, agronomy just as well, from geometry, and the focus for progressivism. We're going to flip the page to 293. Educators is teaching students how to think rather than what they think. The slogan teachers is God on the side rather than